Can everybody hear me? Okay. So my name is Simon Dennehy. I'm from Dublin in Ireland, and for the last 9 years we've been looking at design for education. It's become a specialty for us. Now we're broadening our scope and we're looking at this design for work. What we specialise in is research-led design for applied human movement. So wherever human people are applied in a certain task of eating, sleeping, working, we research that, research the history of work, the future of work, and then we position ourselves on a very research-led design directory to disrupt the workspace and the education space based on our knowledge of how humans should move, how we should interact, how we should experience education. We have a very small team of 5 designers based in Dublin. We are, I guess, multidisciplinary. We have artists, we have other industrial designers focusing on aesthetic design. My background would be more research-led design, and then we have engineers as well. But our extended team includes PhD researchers looking at pedagogy, looking at space requirements, lighting, acoustics. So we have very, I guess, dynamic teams of researchers following us, and I guess when we go in and we test some of our furniture or some of our solutions, there's white papers and PhDs written on that and master's research as well. So it becomes a very central line of focus for our company when we bring a product out. We have a very small amount of intimate clients. Because of our research, projects for us can last for several years. Some projects, so the projects I'll talk about today are the Ray chair, which you sat on earlier in the building, and some of the float chairs here as well. Some of this work has started in 2006, so it's been on our agenda for quite a long time. That's because I guess we take a long time out and we look at how we should be working, how we should be experiencing education, and then we look to really disrupt existing norms. So our clients take a long time. Most of our work is away from the desk now, so we actually sit around workshops looking at the fine details and looking to minimize components, minimize complexity so that we simplify the whole project, the whole process. So a lot of it is debate, again, with different teams around Ireland and around Europe. We sit for a long time just discussing those small details and trying to get perfection in a reduced amount of components. But for those reduced amount of components, we look for an extreme amount of movement on the furniture. So some of you will have sat on flexible seat chairs today. The whole idea of that I'll explain in a minute, but that's a reduction in components and trying to get an increase in function, an increase in movement in the person. Doesn't seem to be working, so we move that forward. Yeah. We could probably use
Fantastic.
Okay. So just to explain a little bit about our line of inquiry. So we started in 2006 looking at primary school education, and it became a very big niche for us. Primary education is not a very mainstream way to look at design for furniture. We have to focus in on the student, on their education type, on teaching practices, on architectural space. So we grew what we call a spine of knowledge. So our spine of knowledge is always centered around human movement. What are the requirements for better human movement, better interaction, psychology? So we developed this pillar of knowledge in primary education. And when we go niche on a project like that, we find that, okay, we looked at our first project into that was school furniture, the chair and desk, trying to improve the chair and desk. What we found is, as soon as we started looking at one set of products, we realized that there's so many other aspects that we need to concentrate on, like space, psychology, acoustics, dynamics, pedagogy, the way teachers interact with children, the way children interact with each other. So we started applying that and then found out, well, there's some carryover. We can now look at higher education. So we're now working in higher education. Some of those teachings are translatable to other areas. Also, the third space for adults we think is a very exciting space. We're now working away from our desk a lot more in cafes and airports and soft seating areas. So that's a really active space at the moment, and there's very few applied concepts that are looking at how adults use laptops or work with each other. We're still designing in that square system for 2 people and 4 people. We're now working in the office. We're looking to make it more user-friendly and less, I guess, sedentary in the office environment. So we're trying to activate people in that workspace again. And then we're now looking at design for disability, design for aging populations. Technology-embedded systems is happening really fast, and we've got some really exciting projects in the education sector there as well. Design for sports, prosthesis and tourism, we think, are emerging disciplines that we will eventually work in, using that same knowledge, spinal inquiry. So our role as a design company is to basically look at, sorry, that's going to get. Okay, so we're semi-academic, semi-commercial. A lot of our passion lies in looking at what's happened in universities and the kind of research that remains on shelves. There's some really, really good severe studies for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, PhDs that lie on the shelves in universities. We've known it in Dublin as well as a really good amount of research that somebody has focused on for 6, 7 years and they've never managed to commercialise it. There's some really good ideas out there. We feel that we can have a really good impact on the world if we take some of that research and work with researchers and professors and actually commercialise some of that work to disrupt. Our role as designers is not to become scientists. So we had a little confusion when we started first. We were designing a new chair and desk solution for schools, and in trying to prove that, we decided we'd go into schools and laboratories, look how people interacted with furniture, and we were charting micro movements, head movements and shoulder movements. And after maybe a year of doing that, we decided, look, that's not our job. The job is to come up with new ideas and pass that to experts like ergonomists and physiologists to prove the theories and to see if that work is done. Our work is to listen to all of the ologies, ecology, ethnography, physiology, technologists, and actually listen to them, talk with them, and see what is driving their line of research. And then little concepts fall out of that space. It's a very interesting space to be in. So we contribute to the European standards for school furniture. It's something that we've been doing for 2.5 years. We were invited onto it because of the idea that we have to elevate students up into a dynamic position. It's not a very popular thing to do. It's quite a historical thing for the Danish education system with Mandal's type work, but there's not very many people currently providing solutions for the upright active student. It seems to be that everybody wants to sit children down to a right angle position and have them quiet and nice and sedentary all day. So we participate in that panel, and it's really been an eye-opener for us to see what the drivers are for furniture, for educational spaces, and we feel that we can really make a big impact. We also contribute to the ergonomics specialist group in the UK, and that's a really exciting group of journalists, child physiologists, psychologists, designers, and activists who are passionate about creating change. I mean, the UK and the Irish system at the moment is quite backward. It's very historically based. There's a lot of fear about moving forward and changing the education system, so we still see education based on, I guess, furniture solutions based on a price-sensitive model. So the requirements for a school chair are £20, that's what they want to spend on a school chair, maybe £15 to £40 for a school desk. So I mean, it's very hard to get momentum into that market. These are specialist groups, and it's really fantastic to be part of that, but I think the solution is going to be 10 to 15 years down the line. We see the same in Ireland. So looking at the Scandinavian model and the appreciation they have for improving the standard for moving around classrooms and treating children with a little bit more dignity in the classroom, it's exciting to see, but I still think we can move forward a lot. So the question that we get asked a lot is why bother? I mean, as furniture designers, school furniture is not the most exciting subject to study. Certainly adult office chairs or car seating or airline seating is a lot more exciting. The reason that we do it is because I'm sure we've all heard of sedentary life or sitting disease. We're trying to combat the effects of sitting disease. There's lots of research out there saying that sitting is as bad as smoking or worse. The underlying thing is that a lack of physical activity throughout the course of the day will cause early mortality. You will die younger if you sit down for longer periods of time. So it's attributed to back pain, deep vein thrombosis, poor lung capacity, colon cancer, you name it. Lots of lifestyle diseases that we experience nowadays can be attributed in part to sitting down for long periods of time. Okay.
Spændende.
So children are kinesthetic learners. So that's my son at 14 months old. He had found a way to climb to the sink in the bathroom and wash his feet. He learns by moving. He always wants to move. And what we find is that as soon as they progress into school, we try to age them as fast as we can. In Ireland now, it's quite common that we send children to school from 4 years of age, which is way too early in my view. We try to make them sit down and experience what it is to sit in a desk from 4 years of age on. So the fun element of growing old has been taken away from them from such a young age. I know here it's 5 to 6 years of age, but it seems to be getting younger and younger.
Trykker du ud i siden?
I think one of the reasons for that is that we fail to listen to what students want to tell us. So we spent a long time inside primary schools in Ireland and in the UK actually sitting with school children, spending time in the classroom with them and asking them what they wanted or what they felt about their school furniture. And what they came out with was so direct, so appropriate, if you go back one, that it really meant that they're so in tune with how they sit, with how they work, with how they experience education. They can't yet materialize it. So forward. What happens is you lose control of your back, your spine, your head, and your upper part and your lower part of your body can't communicate with each other anymore. Basically because your pelvis rotates backwards. You can see here that your rib cage ties the middle part of your back together quite well. It's relatively rigid, but you often see people with neck pain and lower back pain and shoulder pain. Okay, that's because we tend to hunch over quite a lot, and because of our pelvis, which is rotated backwards, the slack is taken up by the lower lumbar. We lose a lot of control of that, and then all of a sudden all this weight is carried down in our stomach, our chest cavity, our lungs, our heart. Circulation is decreased. We lose ability to control our feet as well. They become extremely static, and we basically become lumps to basically thinking lumps. But all that thinking is kind of eradicated. After a while, children from age 8 onwards lose the ability to repair, so they get used to sitting down from 4 years of age to 8 years of age, and they start to accept the static position. And one of the most stressful positions for a child is sitting still. They want to move all the time. But the classroom, especially in Ireland and the UK and most of the US, is predicated on children sitting down in lines. So they begin to accept this position. What we find is that the intervertebral discs start to dehydrate, shrink. We know adults now at 35 years of age, 25 years of age with severe lower and upper back pain, slip discs, and these illnesses we kind of normally associated with grandparents, and now we're seeing them in very young generations of people. And shoulder pain is something that's really creeping in nowadays, and that's because of iPads, and we're kind of punching over our work quite a lot, and all the focus is becoming on one single item in front of us rather than the global classroom around us. Our heads are off balance when we hunch over, and that's a lot of weight that moves us down, puts all this weight from our rib cage down to our stomach and chest cavities. You've got all these organs in here that need healthy blood flow. When we come back after, we see it especially in schools when children come back after eating lunch, they can be very lethargic because they need healthy blood flow to digest their food, and all of a sudden they're sitting down with all this weight on their digestive system. They find it very hard to process. Their lung capacity is decreased. We need healthy lung capacity to breathe and to think and to feed our brain with oxygen. And that seizes as well. There's been some very interesting research saying that children now who are 10 and 12 years of age are now running a mile, which is just over a kilometre, about a minute slower than what their parents would have, because we're so used to sitting down for a long period of time. There's been a big call in the UK at the moment, and I'm sure it's here as well, about improving school bags for children and making them carry less weight. So there's been a whole movement to increase, wheelie bags so that they don't have to carry so much weight. What we see is that children are being dropped at their door to school. So adults will pull up, drop their children off. The children walk 100, 200 metres into the classroom and get collected in the evening. So we're not even walking to school anymore. We're just sitting there all day. So we have a very complex network of veins. We need healthy blood flow around our full body, and it's very much connected to our head and lungs. And as soon as we start decreasing that, we find that it's very hard to concentrate for a long period of time in a school. So you get children who just zone out, completely zone out from maybe an hour into the class. And we've seen that, and it's quite scary to see, because as soon as they do that, the teacher starts picking on them. They're considered to be messers in the school, and all we really need to do is start to activate them and start enabling them to move more. Also, when it comes to sitting down, we tend to slouch in our seats, and when we slouch in our seats, what happens is we actually bear weight on the soft tissue of our backsides. So everybody has sit bones. We've got hard bones, it's like your elbow bone back here. If we can sit on those hard bones, it's much healthier than sitting on soft tissue. And what happens in soft tissue is we start pinching muscles, we start cutting off blood flow, we get cut and we get bruised, and that's exactly what we see in younger children. They go home with bruises on their legs, and bruises on their backs. It's the same thing if we lean on a table like this. After a while, we lean with our elbows onto the table, and it's much better for us than leaning with the soft tissue on the edge of the table. What we noticed when we went to school is this is a typical marketing shot on the left. This is how we advertise our children. This is how we expect to see children sitting down. When we go into the school, what we see is children hunched over their desk, sitting at the edge of their chair, or crouched down, because of a number of factors. One of the main factors is the chair is sloped backwards. And when the chair is sloped backwards, our natural position is to lie back and sit and look up at the ceiling a little bit more if we were to sit at 90 degrees. However, our desks for the most part are flat, and it's different in an office where you have a screen in front of you and you can actually look at something that's in line with your line of sight. But for children, the optimum visual distance is approximately 300 millimeters, so they need their work very close to them. Okay? So they'll do everything in their power to move their head right over their work, and the head guides the rest of the body. So if the head goes off center and comes down in front of their books, the whole body is sacrificed as a result of that. So some of the kids here sitting on the edge of their chair, they're the type of kids that are going home in pain, basically. And they're able to tell us that, and they can do nothing about it, they don't have a voice. So these are some of the postures. Even with a sloped surface, the chair doesn't do them any favours. You can see that she's trying to pull herself exactly right in front of her work. And we find that children are really intent on learning, and when they can learn at all, it's all about, in primary school where you're learning to read and write, hand-eye coordinating the task book is very important. So they pull themselves right in front of their work, sometimes within 15 centimetres, and as a result the rest of their body is sacrificed. So they've got head movement, very little shoulder movement, almost no leg movement whatsoever. So again, this is the marketing shot. Let's sit at right angles. However, we see that you can't sit at right angles. You can't really focus. The only thing you can do is pay attention to the teacher, but for primary school that's not really possible because of something we've highlighted here, the angle of interface. So we interface primarily with two surfaces, the seat surface and the desk surface. And if the seat surface is reclined backwards and the table surface is flat, we've got to now navigate through 185 degrees or 190 degrees in order to just focus on the work in front of us. So you can imagine for a child learning education and learning how to read and write, they're at a huge disadvantage from day one. So when we started researching in 2006, we came across some very exciting Danish research from A.C. Mandal, and I'm sure you all know the CIS furniture and the forward sloping furniture that's been selling for years. His line of research said, look, consider yourself, or consider a horse rider on horseback. You don't require a backrest when you're sitting down on horseback because your pelvis is rotated forwards. And the idea is that if you can separate your legs, rotate your pelvis forward, you're in neutral balance. When you're in neutral balance, your muscles are firing, top half and bottom half of your body are communication together, and it's much easier to activate yourself and move. For people in office chairs, we tend to recline, we tend to pull our screens backwards, and that means that we don't move as much, we're off balance, and it's harder to get up out of our desks. So the whole idea is that if you can sit upright in a neutral balance like that, it's much easier to activate, much easier to move around, and you're much more willing to move around. There's some really interesting research by Mark Hamilton in the States, and he's suggesting that it's not about sitting down for 9 hours a day in front of an office and then going to a gym and running. You do very little to repair the damage that's done throughout the course of the day. The key to healthy living is continuous low threshold movement. So it's not about running and sprinting, it's about small movements continuously throughout the course of the day. You're much better off sitting like that in an upright position where you can move. It's like you're in a tennis serve, you're waiting for a tennis ball to come down the court. You're able to dissipate pressure between left and right leg. Your stomach muscles are activated, your back muscles are activated, your neck is activated. So this is work that we started in 2006. We have a patent on a flexible seat, which you've probably sat on in the other building. The idea of the flexible seat is that it's like a saddle type seat when you sit on it. So the seat deforms into a saddle type seat. You've got a rigid pommel in the center that stops you from falling off the chair, but for the rest of it, it's almost similar to a forward tilting chair. So your pelvis is enabled to prop forward. I'm sure if anybody was sitting there without a desk, you'd noticed that it got quite, you felt pressure on your sit bones after a while. If you're sitting in front of a desk and you're sitting much higher than that, it actually becomes, you get used to it very easily, and you're able to, what we found when we were in a school is that children's legs and the second half of their body, the lower half of their body was really activated. They became extremely agile in the classroom, and we saw a lot of almost pedaling. So they're pumping blood to the bottom half of their body and moving their feet and that. We also had I think I skipped this slide. So the desk solution that we had from my master's was a sloping desk of 15 degrees. What that did is it propped the books in front of the students. So now you've got a forward rotated pelvis and you've got a sloping desk. The books are presented forwards. You've also got an elbow rest in the front of the desk, so that the child can, it's like an arm rest onto your chair, so you can actually bear the weight of your chest cavity in your head as you lean forward onto your work. And then we have a storage solution on the back with that as well. So you can prop books if you're reading or if you're copying. We also brought storage solutions into it. There's a place for your school bag at the back. They're both height adjustable. So we did a lot of research in the laboratory in Cork in the south of Ireland where we monitored students. So this is how a student looked in the lab. We had to get them to wear shorts and tight tops. We put nodes on them so we could plot their movement over time. And we went in to a test where we monitored them on traditional school furniture and then on perched school furniture. And the difference was phenomenal. I mean, we had them in for an hour apiece. And we got them to do everyday task work like reading and writing. And this is the type of posture we saw all the time. It's really quite scary. It's quite scary how often and how frequently they assume that position for how long. I mean, they don't move at all. It's really scary. On top of that, for the most part in Ireland and the UK, they don't have a storage space for their bags, so their bags go underneath their feet. So that only complicates the matter. It reduces their freedom of leg movement as well. So they just sacrifice the lower half of their body. It doesn't get used. On the perched school furniture, we see that they take up far less footprint. They're higher, they're able to sit down or sit upright, and they're able to move a lot more. We have a pressure pad on the feet here, so we saw a huge activation in feet. They constantly move their feet up and down, and as well as that, we saw less neck flexion and back flexion. It's going the wrong way. Can you go back? One more. Yeah. So you can see here, so this is some of the pressure readings that we took on the seat pan. So we put a pressure pad on the seat. So on the left we see the perched school furniture, and on the right we see a traditional school furniture. What we're looking for is we're looking for high concentrations of stress here and here. So this is your sit bone, it's like your elbows. So the sit bones here are bearing the weight of the student, and then the fleshy part of the legs are evenly distributed throughout the back of the leg, so to here. Okay? It means that the pelvis is aligned. It means that the sit bones are aligned and the student is sitting in a neutral position, okay, because the pelvis is aligned. What we see here is that the pelvis, you can actually see that the pelvis doesn't have a high concentrated area, and then at the back of the chair there are sacral sitting. So the pelvis is rotated back.